On April 14, 1988, a United States Navy frigate hit a mine in the Persian Gulf. 10 American sailors were wounded. The ship nearly sank. 4 days later, the United States launched the largest naval battle it had fought since World War II. In a single day, one single day, the U.S. Navy destroyed half of Iran's operational naval fleet. Iran fired missiles. Iran shot at helicopters. Iran sent its best ships into battle. None of it worked. This is the story of Operation Praying Mantis, the battle that almost no one talks about, the battle that ended Iran's dreams of controlling the Persian Gulf, and the battle that set the stage for everything happening between the United States and Iran right now, in 2025. Stay with me, because this story has everything. To understand Operation Praying Mantis, you need to understand what the Persian Gulf looked like in 1987 and 1988. It looked like a war zone, because it was won. The Iran-Iraq War had been grinding on since 1980. 8 years of artillery, poison gas, and trench warfare that killed over 1 million people. But by the mid-1980s, both sides had expanded the battlefield. They had taken the war to the sea. This became known as the Tanker War. Iran and Iraq were both attacking oil tankers in the Persian Gulf. The logic was brutal and simple. If you can cut off your enemy's oil exports, you cripple their economy, you cripple their war machine. So both sides started hitting anything that moved. Iraq attacked Iranian tankers with French-made Exocet missiles fired from aircraft. Iran responded by mining shipping lanes and attacking tankers with speedboats, helicopters, and shore-based missile batteries. The problem was that the Persian Gulf is one of the most important waterways on Earth. About 20% of the world's oil passes through it. And when tankers started getting blown up, the entire global economy started to feel it. Kuwait, which was neutral in the war but sitting right next to Iraq, was getting hit especially hard. Iranian forces were targeting Kuwaiti tankers to punish Kuwait for supporting Iraq financially. Kuwait did something clever. They approached both the United States and the Soviet Union and asked each of them to reflag Kuwaiti tankers under their respective national flags. The idea was simple. If a Kuwaiti tanker flew an American flag, Iran would think twice before attacking it, because attacking an American-flagged vessel would mean attacking America. The Soviets agreed to reflag 3 tankers. The United States, not wanting to be outmaneuvered by the USSR in the Gulf, agreed to reflag 11. This decision pulled the U.S. Navy directly into the middle of the Iran-Iraq War. The operation was called Operation Earnest Will. It began in July 1987. U.S. Navy warships would escort reflagged Kuwaiti tankers through the Persian Gulf, protecting them from Iranian attack. Iran was furious. From Tehran's perspective, America was now openly taking Iraq's side. America was escorting oil shipments that funded the Iraqi war machine that was killing Iranian soldiers. So Iran escalated. Iranian forces began laying mines across the Persian Gulf shipping lanes. Not randomly, strategically, placed at night by small boats in waters that American ships would have to pass through. In September 1987, U.S. forces caught an Iranian ship, the Iran Ajr, laying mines in the Gulf at night. Navy SEALs rappelled onto the ship from helicopters. They captured the crew and found the mines still on deck, ready to be deployed. The ship was later sunk, but Iran kept laying mines, and on April 14, 1988, one of those mines found its target. The USS Samuel B was an Oliver Hazard Perry-class guided missile frigate, 500 feet long. A crew of about 220 sailors. Commissioned in 1986, she was barely 2 years old. On April 14th, she was transiting the central Persian Gulf, returning from escort duty. Her crew was alert but not expecting immediate danger. They were in international waters. At 10 minutes past 10 in the morning, the Roberts hit a mine. The explosion tore open her hull below the waterline. The force of the blast was so violent it cracked her keel, the spine of the ship. Fires broke out. Flooding began immediately. 10 sailors were injured, some severely. The ship was in danger of sinking. What happened next is one of the great stories of damage control in the history of the U.S. Navy. The crew of the Roberts fought to save their ship for hours. Sailors formed human chains to pass buckets of water to fight fires. Engineers worked in flooded, smoke-filled compartments to keep the pumps running. The executive officer coordinated damage control efforts across the ship, while the vessel was still in danger of going down. They saved her. The Samuel B. Roberts did not sink. She was eventually towed to port, then shipped back to the United States for repairs that took almost 2 years and cost $96 million. But in Washington, the decision had already been made. This would not go unanswered. President Ronald Reagan approved a military response. The operation was named Praying Mantis, after the insect that strikes suddenly, precisely, and without warning. The target was Iran's oil platforms in the Persian Gulf, specifically 2 platforms that U.S. intelligence had confirmed were being used by Iranian forces as military staging areas and radar posts: the Sahand platform and the Siri platform. Additionally, U.S. forces were authorized to engage any Iranian naval vessels that threatened American ships. The operation was set for April 18th, 4 days after the Roberts hit the mine. The U.S. Navy assembled a significant force for Operation Praying Mantis. The core of the operation would be carried out by surface action groups. Each group was built around cruisers and destroyers, supported by frigates and aircraft. Surface Action Group Charlie would attack the Sasan oil platform. Surface Action Group Bravo would attack the Siri platform. A third group would operate as a reaction force, ready to engage any Iranian naval response. Additionally, the USS Enterprise Carrier Strike Group was positioned in the northern Arabian Sea. Enterprise herself would not enter the Persian Gulf, but her aircraft were on alert and could be called in if the situation escalated. The rules of engagement were carefully crafted. U.S. forces would warn the Iranians on the platforms before opening fire, giving them time to evacuate. Civilian casualties were to be avoided, but once the warning was given, Iranian military personnel who remained and resisted would be engaged, and any Iranian naval vessel that moved to attack American ships could be sunk. The Iranians had significant naval assets in the Gulf. Their most capable ships were 3 Sam-class frigates, British-built warships originally sold to the Shah of Iran before the 1979 revolution. These were serious vessels, equipped with sea-skimming missiles, 5-inch guns, and electronic warfare systems. In the right circumstances, they could pose a real threat to American destroyers. Iran also had a large fleet of boghammer speedboats, fast, armed with rockets and machine guns, used to harass tankers and merchant ships. And it had shore-based Silkworm anti-ship missiles, Chinese-made with a range of over 50 miles, capable of hitting ships they could barely see on radar. On the morning of April 18, 1988, all of this was about to collide. 0700 hours, Persian Gulf time. USS Merrill and USS Lind McCormick approached the Sasan oil platform. The platform was manned by Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps forces, who had been using it as a base to coordinate attacks on shipping. The Americans hailed the platform on radio. They identified themselves. They told the Iranians on the platform that they had 20 minutes to evacuate, 20 minutes to get off the platform and into lifeboats before the U.S. Navy opened fire. The Iranians on the platform responded by opening fire with small arms and rocket-propelled grenades. That was their answer. The American ships returned fire, 5-inch guns, rapid fire. The platform was hit repeatedly. Iranian Revolutionary Guard personnel scrambled for lifeboats. Some made it. American forces later captured several Iranians in the water. The Sasan platform was destroyed. Simultaneously, Surface Action Group Bravo was approaching the Siri platform. The same warning was given. The Iranians on Siri did not fire back. They evacuated. American forces then boarded the platform, searched it, confirmed it had been used as a military post, and destroyed it. By mid-morning, both platforms were burning. But Iran was not going to accept this quietly. The Iranian military responded with everything it had available in the Gulf. Iranian speedboats, bog hammers, began moving to attack a civilian oil facility on Abu Musa Island. They hit a Pakistani tanker. They opened fire on an American-flagged tanker. U.S. Marine Corps attack helicopters operating from the USS Trenton were vectored onto the speedboats. The helicopters attacked. Several bog hammers were destroyed, others scattered. But the real threat was coming from the Iranian frigate fleet. The Sahand, one of Iran's SAM-class frigates, had left Bandar Abbas and was moving through the Gulf. She was fully armed, and her crew was clearly looking for a fight. As she moved, she fired on American helicopters operating in the area. That was the last mistake the Sahand ever made. U.S. forces responded under the rules of engagement. 6 intruder attack aircraft from the USS Enterprise operating from outside the Gulf were directed to engage. Additionally, surface ships moved to attack. The Sahand was hit by multiple Harpoon anti-ship missiles and laser-guided bombs. A Harpoon missile is not something a ship survives easily. It weighs 1,500 pounds and carries a 220-pound warhead. It skims the surface of the water at near supersonic speed and detonates inside the hull. The first Harpoon hit the Sahand amidships, then another, then bombs from the A-6s. The ship caught fire. Secondary explosions began as her own ammunition and fuel ignited. The Sahand sank. She went down with most of her crew. Only a handful of survivors were recovered from the water. It was the worst single loss of life for the Iranian Navy in the entire war. But Iran still had another frigate in the area, the Sabalan. The Sabalan's captain had apparently watched what happened to the Sahand, because when an A-6 intruder appeared above his ship, the Sabalan launched a missile at it. The A-6 evaded, and then the pilot rolled back around and put a single laser-guided 500-pound bomb directly down the Sabalan's smokestack. One bomb, down the stack. The explosion tore through the engine room. The Sabalan went dead in the water. She was crippled, on fire, unable to move, listing badly. At this point, U.S. commanders requested permission to sink her. The request went up the chain, all the way to Secretary of Defense Frank Carlucci. Carlucci said no. He decided that sinking a second Iranian frigate, on top of everything else that had happened that day, might push the situation too far. The Sabalan was finished as a fighting vessel. Let her burn. Iranian tugs eventually came out and towed the burning Sabalan back to port. As the day was winding down, Iran made one more move. From shore batteries on the Iranian coast, Iran fired a Silkworm anti-ship missile. The Silkworm is a serious weapon. It was developed in China based on Soviet anti-ship missile technology. It flies low and fast. It carries a large warhead. And in 1988, it was capable of sinking a destroyer. The missile was aimed at USS Gary, an American frigate operating in the Gulf. The missile missed. It passed close enough that the crew of the Gary could see it, but it missed and impacted harmlessly in the water. That was Iran's last offensive action of the day. By nightfall, Operation Praying Mantis was over. Let's step back and look at what happened in a single day. The United States Navy destroyed 2 oil platforms being used as Iranian military bases. The United States Navy sank the Iranian frigate Sahand with most of her crew. The United States Navy crippled the Iranian frigate Sabalan. The United States Navy sank or disabled 3 Iranian speedboats. Iran lost roughly half of its operational naval combat power in the Persian Gulf in a single afternoon. American casualties: 0 killed in action. 0 ships sunk. 1 helicopter was lost during the operation. It went down due to mechanical failure, not enemy fire. Both crew members were killed. That was the full American price for the day. It was, by any military measure, a catastrophic Iranian defeat. And it was achieved through a combination of superior training, superior technology, superior coordination, and superior intelligence. The U.S. Navy knew where Iranian ships were, where the platforms were, what weapons Iran had. Iran was largely fighting blind. But the story of Praying Mantis doesn't end on April 18th, because 2 months later, on July 3rd, 1988, the USS Vincennes, operating in the same waters, shot down Iran Air Flight 655. 290 civilians killed, all of them dead because the Vincennes crew mistakenly identified a civilian Airbus as an attacking Iranian fighter jet. The United States never formally apologized. It eventually paid compensation to the families of the victims, but maintained that the commanding officer had acted appropriately given the information available. In Iran, Flight 655 is remembered as a deliberate act of murder. It is taught in schools, it is commemorated every year, and it is one of the reasons, one of many, why the hatred between Iran and the United States runs so deep. Operation Praying Mantis had consequences that echo right up to the present day. First, it ended the tanker war. After April 18, 1988, Iran largely stopped attacking international shipping in the Persian Gulf. The combination of devastating military defeat and international pressure convinced Tehran that the cost of continuing was too high. The Iran-Iraq War itself ended 4 months later, in August 1988. Second, it exposed Iran's military weakness in a way that shaped Iranian strategy for the next 4 decades. Iran learned that in a conventional naval battle against the United States, it would lose. Badly. The Sahand went to the bottom. The Sabalan was crippled. Iranian speedboats were swatted out of the water by Marine helicopters. The Silkworm missile missed. None of Iran's weapons had meaningfully threatened American ships. So Iran changed its approach. Over the following decades, Iran invested heavily in weapons and tactics designed specifically to make a direct naval confrontation with the U.S. Navy too costly. They developed vast stockpiles of anti-ship missiles, hundreds of them, some now highly sophisticated. They built swarms of fast attack boats designed to operate in coordinated wolf-pack tactics that might overwhelm American defenses through sheer numbers. They invested in naval mines, the same weapon that triggered Praying Mantis in the first place, and they developed ballistic missiles specifically designed to hit aircraft carriers. The modern Iranian military is not built to fight the U.S. Navy the way the Sahand tried to fight it on April 18, 1988. It's built to make the U.S. Navy bleed so badly that Washington decides the fight isn't worth having. That's called asymmetric warfare, and Iran has become one of the world's leading practitioners of it. Third, Praying Mantis shaped the psychology of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. The IRGC was humiliated on April 18th. Their men on the Sahand platform fired rocket-propelled grenades at American destroyers and were blown apart. Their fast boats were shot up by Marine helicopters. It was a complete public defeat. But the IRGC drew a lesson from this that was different from the lesson the Iranian Navy drew. The Iranian Navy concluded, "Don't fight the Americans conventionally. You will lose." The IRGC concluded, "We need to fight in ways the Americans can't respond to: proxies, drones, mines, rockets fired from Lebanon or Yemen or Iraq, operations that can't be traced directly back to Tehran, pressure that never rises quite to the level that would justify a full American military response." Look at the world today. The Houthis firing drones and missiles at ships in the Red Sea, Hezbollah rockets hitting Israeli cities, militia groups attacking American bases in Iraq and Syria, the Shahed drones striking Ukrainian cities. All of this connects in a direct line back to the lessons the IRGC learned from April 18, 1988. Before we close, I want to take a moment to talk about the human element of this battle. The sailors of the USS Samuel B. Roberts performed one of the most remarkable feats of damage control in modern naval history. Their ship was cracked nearly in half. She was flooding, she was on fire, and they saved her. The Roberts received the Navy Unit Commendation for her crew's actions. She was repaired, returned to service, and continued operating in the U.S. Navy for years after the battle. On the Iranian side, the sailors of the Sahand died fighting. Whatever one thinks of the Iranian government, the men who went down with that ship were sailors doing their duty as they understood it. They deserve to be remembered as such. War is rarely simple. The politicians and strategists who order battles rarely go to the bottom with the ships they send into combat. And the 2 American crewmen lost in the helicopter that went down. They died not in combat, but in a mechanical failure in waters that were already dangerous enough. Their sacrifice deserves to be acknowledged. We are now in 2025, and the Persian Gulf is tense in ways that feel very familiar. Iran's nuclear program has advanced further than at any point in history. Iran now has enough enriched uranium to build multiple nuclear weapons, if it chooses to take the final steps. The question of whether Israel or the United States will conduct military strikes against Iranian nuclear facilities is not hypothetical. It is discussed openly in government offices in Washington, Tel Aviv, and Tehran. If such strikes happen, the Persian Gulf becomes a flashpoint immediately. Iran has stated, repeatedly publicly, that it will close the Strait of Hormuz in response to military attack. The Strait of Hormuz is the narrow passage through which about 20% of the world's oil passes every single day. Closing it, even for a few weeks, would send oil prices spiking in ways that would be felt in every country on Earth. Can Iran actually close the strait? That is one of the most debated questions in military analysis today. In purely military terms, the United States Navy could almost certainly keep the strait open. American firepower in the region is overwhelming. But keeping the strait open would mean fighting a war against Iranian mines, swarms of fast attack boats, shore-based missile batteries, submarines, and potentially ballistic missiles targeting American ships. Iran has spent 37 years since Operation Praying Mantis preparing for exactly this scenario. It would not look like April 18, 1988. It would be far messier, far more costly, and far more dangerous. The Houthis attacking shipping in the Red Sea right now, backed by Iran, armed with Iranian weapons and Iranian technology, are a preview of what that kind of war might look like. Not a clean, one-sided American victory like Praying Mantis, but a grinding, expensive, politically difficult campaign against an enemy that won't stand and fight conventionally, that will simply keep hitting, keep bleeding, keep making the cost of the fight unacceptable. That is Iran's strategy, and it was born in large part on the day the Sahand went to the bottom of the Persian Gulf. Operation Praying Mantis lasted less than 12 hours. In those 12 hours, the United States demonstrated what its Navy could do to a conventional opponent in the Persian Gulf, and Iran learned exactly the right lessons from the defeat. Not how to fight the U.S. Navy conventionally, better, but how to make sure the U.S. Navy never wants to fight Iran again. The Persian Gulf has never been at peace since that day. The mines, the proxies, the drones, the missiles, the decades of confrontation at the edge of open war. All of it connects back to a Tuesday morning in April 1988, when a ship called the Samuel B drove over a piece of metal floating just beneath the surface of the water, and the world changed. If you want to understand the Middle East today, if you want to understand why Iran does what it does, why it fights the way it fights, why it arms the groups it arms, you need to understand Operation Praying Mantis. Now you do. If this video gave you something to think about, subscribe to Naval War Room. We publish new analysis every day, scenarios, history, the weapons and strategy behind the headlines. The next video is already loading.